The Phoenix Police Department's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Detective Sarah Martinez rubbed her tired eyes and stared at the stack of case files threatening to topple from her desk. 15 years on the force had taught her to expect the unexpected, but nothing could have prepared her for the call that came in at 3:47 a.m. on that sweltering Tuesday morning in July 2019. "We've got a situation on Elm Street," crackled the voice through her radio. Domestic disturbance turned into something much worse. "There's a kid involved. She's not talking." Sarah grabbed her badge and keys, her stomach already knotting with the familiar dread that accompanied cases involving children. The drive through Phoenix's empty streets gave her time to steel herself, but nothing could have prepared her for what she found at the small, run-down house on Elm Street. Crime scene tape fluttered in the desert wind like yellow warning flags. The front door hung askew on its hinges, splintered wood scattered across the concrete porch. Inside, the living room told a story of violence. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, and dark stains on the carpet that the forensics team was carefully documenting. But it was the closet in the back bedroom that would haunt Sarah's dreams for months to come. That's where they found Emma Rodriguez, curled into a ball so small she seemed to disappear among the hanging clothes. Her big brown eyes stared at nothing, her thumb tucked firmly in her mouth. A 6-year-old child who had witnessed something so traumatic that her mind had simply shut down. "How long has she been like this?" Sarah asked Officer Martinez, who was kneeling beside the paramedics as they gently examined the little girl. "Neighbors called it in around midnight. Found her exactly like this. Won't respond to her name. Won't eat, won't drink. Just ... stares." The paramedics confirmed what Sarah already knew physically. Emma was unharmed. But the invisible wounds ran deeper than any medical examination could reveal. As they carefully lifted her from the closet, Emma's body remained rigid, her eyes never focusing on any of the concerned faces surrounding her. At the hospital, Emma's silence continued to deepen like a protective cocoon. Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of the pediatric trauma unit, had seen selective mutism before, but Emma's case was particularly severe. "It's like she's built a wall around herself," Dr. Williams explained to Sarah as they watched the child through the observation window. "Her mind is protecting her from having to relive whatever she witnessed." The investigation revealed the horrifying truth piece by piece. Carlos Rodriguez, Emma's father, was the ringleader of a drug trafficking operation that had been using their family home as a distribution center. On that fatal night, a deal had gone wrong. Emma's mother, Maria, had tried to protect her daughter and paid the ultimate price. The neighbors had heard the screaming, the gunshots, the squealing tires, but by the time police arrived, the perpetrators had vanished, leaving behind only destruction and one traumatized little girl. For 3 weeks, Emma remained locked in her silent world. Child psychologist Dr. Rebecca Chon tried every technique in her arsenal. She brought coloring books filled with bright, cheerful images. Emma wouldn't touch them. She introduced puppet shows with friendly characters designed to coax out conversation. Emma stared right through them. She even brought in Emma's favorite stuffed animal from her destroyed bedroom, a worn teddy bear named Mr. Patches. Emma held him close, but never spoke to him. The case against Carlos Rodriguez and his associates was falling apart without Emma's testimony. The physical evidence was circumstantial at best, and the other witnesses were too scared to come forward. Prosecutor Amanda Williams was growing desperate. "We know she saw everything," she told Sarah during one of their strategy meetings. "She's the key to putting these monsters away. But how do you get a traumatized 6-year-old to relive the worst night of her life?" Sarah had worked dozens of cases involving child witnesses, but Emma's selective mutism presented unique challenges. Traditional interview techniques were useless when the witness simply refused to engage with any human being. The foster care system was struggling too. Emma had been placed with the loving Santos family, but even their patience and kindness couldn't break through the walls she had built around herself. It was during one particularly frustrating afternoon, as Sarah sat in the break room staring at Emma's case file, that Officer Jake Thompson slid into the chair across from her. Jake was known throughout the department for his work with the K-9 unit, but his specialty wasn't drug detection or criminal apprehension. His partner was different. "I've been thinking about the Rodriguez case," Jake said quietly, pulling out his phone and scrolling through photos. "Have you considered that maybe Emma doesn't need to talk to a person?" Sarah looked up from her files, intrigued despite her exhaustion. "What do you mean?" Jake turned his phone around, revealing a photo that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. A magnificent golden retriever sat in perfect pose, wearing a blue vest with the words, "Facility Dog," embroidered in gold letters. His eyes were warm and intelligent, his expression radiating the kind of gentle patience that seemed almost human. "His name is Thor," Jake explained, his voice filled with quiet pride. "He's not a typical police dog. He's been specially trained by K-9 Companions for Independence to work with traumatized children and vulnerable witnesses. I've seen him work miracles with kids who've shut down completely." Sarah studied the photo, her detective instincts beginning to stir with possibility. "You think he could reach Emma?" "I think he might be the only one who can," Jake replied. "Children often feel safer with animals than with adults, especially after they've been hurt by the adults who are supposed to protect them. Thor doesn't. Judge, he doesn't ask scary questions. He doesn't remind Emma of the people who failed her. He's just there, present and patient and completely safe." The idea was unconventional, even radical. Using a therapy dog in a criminal investigation was relatively new territory, especially in a case this serious. But as Sarah looked at the photo of Thor's kind eyes and gentle expression, she felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. "When can we meet him?" she asked. Jake smiled for the first time in days. "How about tomorrow morning? I have a feeling Thor's been waiting for a case exactly like this." The Maricopa County Child Advocacy Center sat nestled among desert palms on a quiet side street, its adobe walls painted in soothing earth tones designed to feel more like home than institution. Detective Sarah Martinez arrived early that Wednesday morning, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee as she waited in the parking lot, watching the sun paint the Arizona sky in shades of pink and gold. At exactly 8:30 a.m., a white Ford Explorer pulled into the space beside her. Through the tinted windows, she could see Officer Jake Thompson adjusting something in the backseat before stepping out with a confident smile. But it was his passenger. That took Sarah's breath away. Thor emerged from the vehicle like something from a fairy tale, 75 pounds of pure golden magnificence, his coat catching the morning sunlight and seeming to glow with an inner warmth. His tail wagged in a steady, gentle rhythm, and his dark brown eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. The blue service vest he wore fit perfectly across his broad chest, the golden lettering identifying him as a facility dog gleaming in the desert sun. "Impressive, isn't he?" Jake said, noticing Sarah's stunned expression. "But don't let the good looks fool you. This guy's got more training than most police officers." Thor approached Sarah with measured steps, his head tilted slightly as if assessing her emotional state. When she extended her hand, he sniffed politely before allowing her to stroke his silky ears. The effect was immediate and surprising. Sarah felt her tension melting away, her breathing becoming deeper and more relaxed. "How does he do that?" she asked, marveling at the immediate sense of calm that seemed to radiate from the dog. 2 years of specialized training," Jake explained, his voice filled with pride. "Thor isn't just trained in basic obedience. He's been taught to read human emotions, to provide comfort without being asked, and most importantly, to remain completely calm in any situation. He's worked with children who've been through sexual abuse, domestic violence, even those who've witnessed murders. He's never met a case he couldn't help with. They made their way through the center's welcoming lobby, past child-friendly murals of rainbows and butterflies, toward the specialized interview rooms designed to put young witnesses at ease. Dr. Rebecca Chun met them at the door, her expression a mixture of professional skepticism and desperate hope. "I have to admit, I'm curious to see if this works," she said, leading them down a carpeted hallway. "Emma's been here every day for 3 weeks, and she's shown no improvement. If anything, she seems to be retreating further into herself." Through the observation window, Sarah could see Emma exactly as she'd been every day since the night of the tragedy. The little girl sat in an oversized purple armchair, her knees drawn up to her chest, staring at a point somewhere beyond the room's cheerful yellow walls. Her dark hair hung in limp strands around her pale face, and her thumb had found its familiar place between her lips. "She hasn't spoken a single word," Dr. Chun continued quietly. "Not to me, not to her foster parents, not even to herself. We've tried art therapy, play therapy, music therapy. Nothing gets through. It's like she's built an invisible fortress around her mind." Jake knelt beside Thor, his hands gently adjusting the dog's vest. "Remember what we talked about, buddy?" he whispered. "This little girl needs you more than anyone has ever needed you before." Thor's tail wagged once, slowly, as if acknowledging the weight of his responsibility. The moment they opened the door to the interview room, Emma's head turned for the first time in weeks. Her vacant stare transformed into something resembling curiosity as Thor padded quietly into the room, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. Jake had positioned himself near the door, far enough away to avoid overwhelming Emma, but close enough to guide Thor if necessary. For several minutes, nothing happened. Emma watched Thor with the same blank expression she'd worn for everyone else. The dog seemed content to simply exist in the space with her, occasionally glancing her way, but never staring, never demanding her attention. Then, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. Emma's rigid posture relaxed slightly, her knees lowering. Just a fraction. Thor, with the intuitive genius that made him exceptional at his job, took one careful step closer to her chair. Dr. Chun held her breath behind the observation glass as Thor executed what could only be described as a perfect approach. He moved with the patience of someone who understood that trust was earned in millimeters, not miles. When he reached the area beside Emma's chair, he settled into a lying position, his head resting on his paws, his warm brown eyes never leaving her face. For the first time since that terrible night, Emma's thumb slipped from her mouth. Her small hand, pale and trembling slightly, reached toward the golden fur that seemed to shimmer with promise. The moment her fingers made contact with Thor's coat, something extraordinary happened. Tears began streaming down Emma's cheeks, not the desperate, panicked tears of trauma, but the slow, healing tears of someone finally feeling safe enough to let down their guard. Thor remained perfectly still, allowing the little girl to bury her fingers in his soft fur, to feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, to anchor herself to something pure and good in a world that had shown her nothing but horror. "My God," Dr. Chun whispered from behind the glass. "Look at her face." Sarah leaned closer to the window, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. For the first time in 3 weeks, Emma's eyes weren't staring at nothing. They were focused, present, alive. She was looking at Thor, as if seeing color for the first time after weeks of gray. The session lasted 2 hours, though it felt like minutes to everyone watching. Emma didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Her body language spoke volumes. She moved from tentative touching to full body contact, eventually curling up beside Thor on the soft carpet, her head resting against his side as she felt the steady rise and fall of his chest. When the session finally ended, Emma's foster mother, Maria Santos, could hardly believe the transformation. The hollow-eyed child she'd brought in that morning had been replaced by someone recognizably human again. "It's like watching someone come back to life," Maria whispered to Sarah as they watched Jake gently coax Emma away from Thor with promises of another visit tomorrow. As they prepared to leave, Emma did something that made everyone in the room freeze. She looked directly at Thor and mouthed a single silent word: "Stay." It was the first attempt at communication she'd made since that terrible night, and though no sound emerged, the message was crystal clear. She had found her lifeline, and she wasn't ready to let go. Jake knelt beside her, his voice gentle as a summer breeze. "Thor will come back tomorrow, Emma. I promise. He's going to help you find your voice again." Emma nodded once, slowly, her fingers reluctantly releasing their grip on Thor's fur. As they led the magnificent dog from the room, he looked back once at the little girl who had already captured his heart, his tail wagging with what could only be described as determination. The miracle worker had arrived, and Emma's journey back to the world of the living had officially begun. The Santos family home sat in a quiet neighborhood of Phoenix, its small front yard dotted with colorful desert flowers that Maria Santos tended with the same gentle care she showed to the foster children who had found refuge under her roof. For 12 years, Maria and her husband Roberto had opened their doors to children who needed healing. But Emma Rodriguez presented challenges unlike any they had faced before. It was Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after Thor's first visit, when everything changed. Maria was preparing Emma's breakfast scrambled eggs cut into small pieces, the way the little girl seemed to prefer, when she heard something that made her freeze at the kitchen counter. From the living room came the soft murmur of a voice she hadn't heard in nearly a month. Emma was speaking. Not to Maria, not to Roberto, not even to herself in the way traumatized children sometimes do when they think no one is listening. She was talking to the 8x10 photograph that Officer Thompson had given her the day before, a professional portrait of Thor, sitting in perfect pose, his golden coat gleaming, his gentle eyes seeming to look directly at whoever held the picture. "I had bad dreams again last night, Thor," Emma whispered to the photograph, her small fingers tracing the outline of the dog's face through the glass. "But I kept thinking about how soft your fur is, and it helped me not be so scared." Maria's heart hammered in her chest as she crept closer to the living room doorway, careful not to make a sound that might break the spell. Emma sat cross-legged on the carpet, the photograph propped against a throw pillow, as if Thor were really there listening to her every word. "I wish you could sleep in my room," Emma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "The closet in. This house looks different than the scary one at home, but sometimes I still think about hiding in there. Do you think that makes me a baby?" The photograph, of course, offered no response, but Emma nodded as if Thor had given her exactly the answer she needed to hear. This pattern continued for days. Each morning, Emma would wake before dawn and have these one-sided conversations with Thor's picture. She told him about her foster parents' kindness, about the new school she was supposed to start in September, about how she missed her mother, but was glad she didn't have to see her father anymore. But it was during their 5th official session together at the Child Advocacy Center that the real breakthrough occurred. Dr. Chun had set up what she called the comfort corner in the main therapy room, a cozy space with soft cushions, warm blankets, and dim lighting designed to feel as safe as possible. Emma had claimed this spot as her own during previous visits, and today she immediately gravitated toward it when Thor entered the room. The difference in Emma's demeanor was striking. While she still didn't speak to the adults in the room, her Entire body language had transformed around Thor. She moved with purpose rather than the mechanical motions she'd shown for weeks. Her eyes tracked the dog's movements with genuine interest rather than the vacant stare that had worried everyone so deeply. Thor, for his part, had developed what could only be described as a sixth sense about Emma's needs. He seemed to understand, instinctively when she needed space and when she craved closeness. When anxiety flickered across her features, he would position himself just close enough for her to touch his fur. When she seemed lost in traumatic memories, he would gently nudge, her hand with his nose, anchoring her to the present moment. It was during their quiet time in the comfort corner, with Emma curled against Thor's side, like a much younger child seeking comfort from a beloved pet, that she began to whisper the words that would change everything. Thor, she breathed into. His golden fur, her voice so soft that Dr. Chun had to strain to hear it through the audio monitoring system. I need to tell you about the scary night, but promise you won't leave me alone after I tell you, okay? Dr. Chun's pen froze over her notepad. Detective Martinez, who had been observing from behind the one-way glass, leaned forward in her chair. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, hoping for, praying for, but now that it was happening, everyone held their breath, terrified that any movement might break the spell. Daddy was yelling at Mommy again, Emma continued, her small fingers twisted in Thor's coat. But this time, it was different. There were other people there, scary people with loud voices and angry faces. Mommy tried to hide me, but I could still hear everything. Thor remained perfectly still, his breathing steady and calming, his warm brown eyes focused on Emma with a kind of patience that seemed infinite. The scary men brought big bags with them, Emma whispered, her voice growing even softer. Daddy said they had medicine in them, but I know it wasn't the good kind of medicine like when I have a fever. It was the bad kind that made Daddy act mean and made strange people come to our house all the time. Dr. Chun was writing frantically now, capturing every precious word while trying not to make any noise that might interrupt Emma's confession. Mommy told me to hide in the closet, the one with her pretty dresses, Emma continued, her face pressed against Thor's side. She said no matter what I heard, I shouldn't come out until morning. But Thor, the sounds were so scary. There was yelling and then there were loud pops like firecrackers. But I knew they weren't firecrackers, because Mommy screamed and then she didn't make any more sounds. Tears were streaming down the little girl's face now, but she didn't stop talking. It was as if a dam had burst, and weeks of suppressed trauma were finally finding their way out through whispered confessions to her four-legged therapist. I stayed in the closet all night, like Mommy said, even when everything got quiet. I was so scared I couldn't stop shaking. I kept thinking maybe if I was really, really quiet, the scary men would forget I was there and just go away. But I was also scared that maybe Mommy was hurt and needed me to help her. Thor shifted slightly, just enough to rest his head more comfortably against Emma's leg, a gesture that seemed to give her the strength to continue. When the police came, I heard them talking about Daddy and the bad medicine and how Mommy couldn't wake up anymore. That's when I knew that the loud pops weren't firecrackers and that everything was going to be different forever. The room fell, silent except for Emma's soft breathing and Thor's gentle panting. Dr. Chun realized she was holding her breath and forced herself to exhale quietly. Do you think Mommy would be proud of me for being brave enough to tell you what happened? Emma asked Thor, looking directly into his warm eyes, as if he might actually answer her. The magnificent dog responded in the only way he could by gently, licking Emma's hand and settling even closer to her small form. It was a gesture that seemed to say, yes, she would be proud. And you're safe now. For Detective Martinez, watching from behind the glass, Emma's whispered confession was both heartbreaking and invaluable. The little girl had provided details, about the drug operation that investigators had only been able to guess at. But more importantly, she had found her voice again, even if she would only use it with Thor. As the session wound down, Emma reluctantly separated herself from Thor's comforting presence. But this time, instead of the desperate clinging that had characterized their previous goodbyes, she seemed calmer, as if sharing her burden had lightened the weight on her small shoulders. "Will you come back tomorrow, Thor?" she asked the dog, directly, ignoring the adults in the room. "I have more things I need to tell you." Officer Thompson knelt beside his partner, his voice gentle as he answered for the dog who had become Emma's lifeline. "Thor will be here every day until you don't need him anymore, Emma, and maybe even after that." For the first time in a month, Emma smiled a small, tentative expression that transformed her entire face and gave everyone in the room hope that healing was finally beginning. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office buzzed with unprecedented energy as news of Emma's breakthrough spread through the legal community like wildfire. Prosecutor Amanda Williams sat in her corner office on the 15th floor, surrounded by towers of case files and legal precedents, staring at the transcript of Emma's confession to Thor. The words on the page represented both the solution to her biggest challenge and the creation of an entirely new one. "This is it," she muttered to herself, highlighting key phrases that would be devastating in court. Emma's innocent but detailed account of the drug operation, the violence, and her mother's murder was exactly what they needed to put Carlos Rodriguez and his associates away for life. There was only one problem: Emma would only speak to a dog. Her assistant, Marcus Chun, knocked on the doorframe before entering with a steaming cup of coffee and a worried expression. "The defense attorney is here," he announced. "Michael Davidson. He's already making noise about inadmissible evidence and prejudicial tactics." Amanda rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. Michael Davidson was known throughout Phoenix as a shark in an expensive suit, brilliant, ruthless, and completely without scruples when it came to defending criminals. If anyone could find a way to exploit the unusual circumstances of Emma's testimony, it would be him. "Send him in," she sighed, knowing this conversation would determine the entire trajectory of the case. Davidson strode into her office like a man who owned the building, his silver hair perfectly styled, his Italian leather briefcase swinging confidently at his side. He was the kind of lawyer who charged $1,000 an hour and was worth every penny to clients who could afford him. "Amanda," he said with a predatory smile, settling into the chair across from her desk without being invited. "I hear you've got quite the problem on your hands. If you're referring to your client's daughter finally finding the courage to tell the truth about what she witnessed, then yes, it's quite a problem for you." Davidson's laugh was as sharp as broken glass. "Oh, come now. We both know this dog and pony show is nothing more than a desperate publicity stunt. You're planning to parade a traumatized child and her emotional support animal in front of a jury to manipulate their sympathies because your actual evidence is circumstantial at best." Amanda's jaw tightened. She'd known this argument was coming, but hearing it stated so bluntly still made her blood boil. Emma Rodriguez is a material witness to multiple felonies, including the murder of her own mother. Her testimony is crucial to this case. Her alleged testimony, Davidson corrected smoothly, to a dog, not to trained investigators, not to mental health professionals, but to an animal that can't be cross-examined, can't verify her statements, and can't be held accountable for any inaccuracies in her recollections. The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of Phoenix traffic 15 floors below. Amanda knew Davidson was posturing, testing her resolve, looking for any sign of weakness he could exploit later in court. But she also knew he had a point. Emma's case was entering uncharted legal territory. "There's precedent," Amanda said finally, reaching for a thick folder marked Facility dogs, legal research. Arizona revised its statutes in 2018 to allow specially trained dogs to accompany vulnerable witnesses during testimony. The law specifically mentions child victims of trauma. Precedent for the presence of support animals, yes, Davidson conceded, his tone becoming more serious. But not precedent for a child who refuses to communicate with anyone except the animal. How exactly do you plan to conduct a direct examination with a witness who won't respond to your questions? It was a fair question, and one that had been keeping Amanda awake at night for the past week. Traditional courtroom procedure required witnesses to respond to attorneys' questions under oath. Emma's selective communication presented challenges that had never been tested in Arizona courts. "We'll adapt our methods," Amanda said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The witness can communicate through the dog if necessary. What matters is that the jury hears the truth about what happened that night. Davidson leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from predatory to genuinely concerned. For just a moment, the expensive suit and calculated arrogance fell away, revealing something almost human underneath. "Amanda, I've been practicing law for 30 years, he said quietly. I've seen what trauma does to children, and I've seen what courtrooms do to them. Are you absolutely certain that putting this little girl on the stand is in her best interest? Even if you win the case, what does it cost her?" The question hit Amanda like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on building a case against Carlos Rodriguez that she'd almost lost sight of the 6-year-old human being at the center of it all. Emma had already suffered more than any child should ever have to endure. Was it right to ask her to relive her trauma in front of a room full of strangers? If we don't prosecute Rodriguez to the fullest extent of the law, how many more children suffer? Amanda countered. How many more families get destroyed by his operation? Emma's testimony could prevent countless other tragedies. Or it could destroy what's left of her childhood, Davidson replied. I'm not saying this as opposing counsel trying to gain an advantage. I'm saying this as a father of 2 daughters. Sometimes the cost of justice is too high. The meeting ended with no resolution, both attorneys understanding that the real decision would ultimately be made by Judge Patricia Hernandez in a preliminary hearing scheduled for the following week. As Davidson left, Amanda found herself staring out her office window at the sprawling city below, wondering if she was fighting for justice or simply fighting to win. That evening, Amanda drove to the Santos family home to discuss the situation with Emma's foster parents. Maria Santos answered the door with flour-dusted hands and a warm smile that faltered when she saw the prosecutor's expression. We need to talk about Emma testifying in court, Amanda said without preamble. They sat around the kitchen table while Emma played quietly in the living room, completely absorbed in arranging her collection of stuffed animals around Thor's photograph. Roberto Santos, a gentle man who worked construction and spent his evenings helping foster children with homework, was the first to speak. She's just starting to heal, he said, his voice heavy with concern. Some mornings she almost seems like a normal little girl again. But then something will trigger a memory, and she'll disappear back into herself for hours. Maria nodded, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Yesterday, she asked me if Thor could come live with us forever. When I explained that he has a job helping other children, she got so upset she wouldn't eat dinner. The idea of being separated from that dog terrifies her. Amanda felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. I know this is difficult, but Emma may be our only chance to get justice for her mother and prevent Carlos Rodriguez from hurting other families. What if she can't do it? Maria asked. What if being in that courtroom, seeing her father, having all those people staring at her, what if it breaks her completely? It was the question that haunted Amanda's dreams and followed her through every waking moment. The legal system was designed for adults, not traumatized children. Courtrooms were intimidating, even for seasoned professionals, let alone a 6-year-old girl who had witnessed unspeakable horrors. "We'll do everything we can to protect her," Amanda promised, though she wasn't entirely sure what that meant in practical terms. "The dog will be with her. We'll clear the courtroom of unnecessary personnel, and we'll ask the judge to allow breaks whenever Emma needs them." 3 days later, Judge Patricia Hernandez called both legal teams into her chambers for a preliminary conference that would determine whether Emma's testimony would even be allowed. The judge was known for her fairness and her particular expertise in cases involving children, but this situation was testing even her considerable experience. "I've reviewed the statute regarding facility dogs," Judge Hernandez said, adjusting her reading glasses as she looked over the legal briefs both sides had submitted. "The law is clear that specially trained dogs can accompany vulnerable witnesses. However, I've never encountered a case where the witness communicates exclusively through the animal." The judge turned to Amanda with a penetrating stare. "Counselor Williams, how exactly do you propose to conduct direct examination under these circumstances?" Amanda had rehearsed this moment dozens of times, but standing in the judge's chambers, she felt the full weight of the precedent she was trying to set. "Your Honor, we propose to adapt traditional examination methods to accommodate the witness's unique communication style. We can ask questions and allow the witness to respond in whatever manner feels safe to her, whether that's speaking directly to the court or communicating through her relationship with the facility dog." A Maricopa County Superior Court building stood like a fortress of justice against the desert sky, its imposing concrete facade and towering columns designed to inspire both respect and intimidation. But on this crisp October morning, courtroom 4C had been transformed into something unprecedented, a practice stage where a 6-year-old girl and a golden retriever would rehearse for the most important performance of their lives. Emma Rodriguez clutched Thor's leash with white knuckles as she entered the empty courtroom for the first time. The vast space seemed to swallow her small frame. Whole wooden benches stretched back like church pews. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead with institutional coldness, and the judge's bench loomed above everything like a throne from an intimidating fairy tale. "It's really big," Emma whispered to Thor, her voice barely audible in the cavernous room. The dog's tail wagged once in acknowledgement, his warm brown eyes scanning the environment with professional assessment before focusing back on his young charge. Prosecutor Amanda Williams watched from the gallery as Emma took her first tentative steps down the center aisle. 3 weeks of intensive preparation had led to this moment, the closed practice session that would determine whether Emma could actually testify in the real trial, scheduled to begin in just 5 days. "Take your time, sweetheart," Amanda called out gently. "This is your courtroom today. Nobody's here except people who care about you." The people who care included a carefully selected support team. Dr. Rebecca Chun, the child psychologist who had been working with Emma since the beginning. Officer Jake Thompson, Thor's handler, and the man who had become something of a surrogate uncle to Emma. Maria Santos, Emma's foster mother, whose presence provided crucial emotional stability. And Judge Patricia Hernandez herself, who had insisted on observing these practice sessions personally to ensure they met her exacting standards. The witness stand, normally an imposing piece of furniture that made even adult witnesses nervous, had been modified for Emma's unique needs. A small stepping stool had been placed beside it, and the chair had been replaced with a more comfortable seat that allowed her feet to touch the floor. Most importantly, a special platform had been installed beside the witness chair, the perfect size for a 75-pound golden retriever to lie comfortably while remaining visible to both the jury and the witness. "Let's start with just getting comfortable in the space," Dr. Chun suggested, her voice echoing slightly in the empty courtroom. "Emma, would you like to show Thor around? You can be his tour guide," This approach proved brilliant. Instead of being overwhelmed by the courtroom's formal atmosphere, Emma began to take ownership of the space. She led Thor to the witness stand, explaining in whispers how the microphone worked and pointing out the American flag that hung in the corner. "That's where the judge sits," she told Thor, pointing to the elevated bench. "She's nice, but she looks really serious when she's working. Do you think she likes dogs?" Judge Hernandez, overhearing from her position in the gallery, smiled and called out, "She loves dogs, especially brave ones like Thor." Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Amanda had seen from her in a courtroom setting. The first major challenge came when they attempted to simulate direct examination. Amanda approached the witness stand with careful, measured steps, her voice pitched low and reassuring. "Emma, can you tell us your full name for the record?" For several long moments, nothing happened. Emma's hand found Thor's fur, her fingers twisting in the golden strands as she retreated into the protective silence that had been her refuge for so many weeks. The courtroom held its collective breath, then so quietly that Amanda had to strain to hear. Emma whispered to Thor, "Should I tell them my name? It's Emma Maria Rodriguez, right? The Maria part is for my mommy." Amanda felt tears prick her eyes, but maintained her professional composure. "Thank you, Emma. That's perfect." They worked through basic questions for an hour. Emma's age, where she lived, whether she understood the difference between truth and lies. Each answer came in the form of whispered conversations with Thor, but gradually, Emma began to speak. Just a little louder, as if gaining confidence in her ability to share her truth. The breakthrough moment came during their second practice session, when Amanda asked Emma to describe her relationship with her mother. "Thor," Emma said, her voice stronger than it had been all morning. "Remember how I told you about Mommy's bedtime stories? She used to make up tales about a little girl who could talk to animals, just like I can talk to you. Mommy said I was special because I could understand what animals were feeling." Dr. Chun made rapid notes, recognizing the significance of Emma, connecting her ability to communicate with Thor to positive memories of her mother. This wasn't just testimony, it was healing in real time. The most challenging part of preparation involved discussing the night of the murder. Amanda had spent sleepless nights crafting questions that would elicit the necessary information without re-traumatizing Emma. The key, she realized, was to let Emma tell her story to Thor while the courtroom simply listened in. "Emma," Amanda said during their third practice session, "can you tell Thor about the last night you spent in your old house?" Emma's entire body tensed, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Thor, with the intuitive genius that made him exceptional at his job, immediately shifted position, resting his head across Emma's lap in a gesture of protection and comfort. "It's okay," Emma whispered to Thor, though everyone understood she was really reassuring herself. "I can tell you because you make me brave." What followed was the most heartbreaking and powerful testimony Amanda had ever heard. Emma described the night of horror with the clarity that only children possess, unfiltered by adult interpretations or legal considerations. Simply the truth as she had experienced it. The scary men brought big bags that made noise when they moved, Emma told Thor, her voice growing steadier as she continued. Daddy was acting different, not just mean like usual, but scared too. And when the loud pops happened, I knew Mommy wasn't going to read me bedtime stories anymore. Officer Thompson, watching from the gallery, found himself wiping away tears as Emma recounted hiding in the closet, waiting through the endless night, not understanding that her world had changed forever. But it was during their fourth practice session that the real magic happened. Judge Hernandez had decided to test Emma's ability to handle cross-examination by having Amanda play the role of defense attorney, asking more challenging questions in a slightly more aggressive tone. "Emma," Amanda said, modulating her voice to sound more formal and intimidating, Are you sure you remember everything correctly? It was very dark that night, wasn't it? Instead of retreating into silence, Emma surprised everyone by looking directly at Amanda for the first time during any practice session. I remember everything, Emma said clearly, her hand resting confidently on Thor's back. Some things you can't forget, even when you want to. And Thor says it's okay to remember scary things if it helps keep other kids safe. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Hernandez leaned forward in her seat, recognizing the profound moment they had just witnessed. Emma had found not just her voice, but her strength. I think she's ready, Dr. Chun whispered to Amanda as they watched Emma gently stroke Thor's ears, both child and dog radiating a calm confidence that had been completely absent just weeks before. Amanda nodded, feeling a mixture of pride, anxiety, and determination coursing through her veins. The question is, are we ready for her? As they prepared to leave the courthouse that afternoon, Emma did something that made everyone stop and stare. She walked to the judge's bench, stood on her tiptoes, and placed her small hand on the polished wood. Thank you for letting Thor. Come with me, she said, speaking directly to Judge Hernandez for the first time. I know grown-ups don't usually let dogs in court, but Thor isn't just any dog. He's my best friend, and best friends should stick together when things get scary. Judge Hernandez smiled, her usually stern judicial demeanor softening completely. You're absolutely right, Emma. Best friends should definitely stick together. As they walked out of the courthouse into the Phoenix sunshine, Thor's tail wagging proudly beside Emma's confident stride, Amanda realized that they hadn't just prepared a witness for testimony. They had helped a traumatized little girl reclaim her voice, her strength, and her belief that she could face anything as long as she wasn't facing it alone. The trial would begin in 3 days, and Emma Rodriguez was ready to tell the world her truth. October 15th, 2019. The date would forever be etched in the memories of everyone who witnessed what unfolded in courtroom 4C of the Maricopa County Superior Court. By 7:30 a.m., 3 hours before the scheduled proceedings, a line of reporters, legal observers, and advocacy group representatives stretched around the building, all hoping to witness what many were calling the most significant moment in Arizona's judicial history. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere crackled with tension, so thick it seemed almost visible. News vans from local and national networks crowded the parking lot, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like mechanical flowers reaching for the sun. Court security had been doubled, not because of any threat, but because of the unprecedented media attention surrounding the case of a 6-year-old girl who would testify alongside her canine companion. Emma Rodriguez sat in the witness preparation room, her small hands smoothing down her favorite purple dress, the same one she had worn during her first breakthrough session with Thor weeks ago. The dress had been her mother's choice from a shopping trip just 2 months before the tragedy, a memory that now brought both comfort and profound sadness. You look beautiful, Mia, whispered Maria Santos, Emma's foster mother, as she gently brushed the little girl's dark hair. Your mama would be so proud of how brave you are. Thor lay at Emma's feet, his golden coat brushed to perfection, his blue service vest freshly cleaned and pressed. Officer Jake Thompson had arrived at dawn to ensure everything was perfect for what he privately considered the most important day of his and Thor's career together. How are you feeling, partner? Jake asked Thor quietly, scratching behind the dog's ears in the spot he knew the retriever loved best. Thor's tail wagged once, slowly, as if he understood the gravity of what lay ahead. Dr. Rebecca Chun entered the room carrying her ever-present notepad and a small gift bag. I brought you something, Emma, she said with a gentle smile. From the bag, she produced a small silver locket on a delicate chain. It's beautiful, Emma breathed, her fingers tracing the intricate engraving on the heart-shaped pendant. Open it, Dr. Chun encouraged. Inside the locket were two tiny photographs, one of Emma's mother, Maria Rodriguez, smiling in happier times, and one of Thor looking directly at the camera with his warm, intelligent eyes. Now your mama and Thor can both be close to your heart when you're being brave, Dr. Chun explained, fastening the necklace around Emma's neck. Meanwhile, in the main courtroom, Prosecutor Amanda Williams was making final preparations with her team. The gallery was packed to capacity, with the front row reserved for the Santos family, Dr. Chun, and other members of Emma's support network. Behind them sat reporters from across the country, their cameras and recording equipment creating a forest of technology that would capture every moment of this historic testimony. At the defendant's table, Carlos Rodriguez sat in an orange jumpsuit, his hands shackled and his face a mask of cold indifference. He had refused his attorney's suggestion to wear civilian clothes, perhaps hoping to appear as a victim of an overzealous prosecution. Michael Davidson, his defense attorney, shuffled through papers with the mechanical precision of a man who knew he was fighting an uphill battle, but was determined to give his client the best defense possible. Judge Patricia Hernandez entered the courtroom at exactly 10 a.m., her black robes flowing behind her like wings. The packed gallery rose as one, the shuffle of feet and rustling of clothing, creating a susurrus of anticipation that seemed to fill every corner of the room. "Be seated," Judge Hernandez commanded, her voice carrying the authority of 2 decades. On the bench. We are here today for the continuation of the state of Arizona versus Carlos Rodriguez. The court notes the extraordinary circumstances surrounding today's proceedings, and I want to make it clear to everyone present that this courtroom will maintain the dignity and respect that every witness deserves, regardless of age. Her gaze swept the gallery, lingering on the reporters and cameras. Any disruption, any outburst, any behavior that this court deems inappropriate will result in immediate removal from these proceedings. Is that understood? A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The prosecution may call its next witness. Amanda Williams rose, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was certain the entire courtroom could hear it. The state calls Emma Rodriguez. The double doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and time seemed to slow to a crawl. Emma appeared first, her purple dress bright against the formal browns and grays of the courtroom, her small hand gripping Thor's leash like a lifeline. The magnificent golden retriever walked beside her with perfect composure, his training evident in every measured step. The gallery fell silent, not the respectful quiet of a typical courtroom, but the profound hush of hundreds of people holding their breath simultaneously. Even the court reporter's fingers paused over her stenotype machine as the most unusual witness in Arizona's legal history made her way down the center aisle. Emma's eyes found her foster parents in the front row, and Maria Santos offered an encouraging smile that seemed to give the little girl strength. Dr. Chun nodded supportively from her seat, while Officer Thompson watched with the pride of a parent watching his child perform in a school play. But it was when Emma's gaze accidentally met her father's cold stare that everyone in the courtroom witnessed a moment that would haunt them forever. Carlos Rodriguez leaned forward slightly, his lips curving into what might have been mistaken for a smile, but was actually something far more sinister, an attempt at intimidation that had worked so many times before. This time, however, something different happened. Instead of cowering or looking away, Emma's free hand found the silver locket at her throat. She stood straighter, her chin lifting with a dignity that seemed impossible in someone so young. And for just a moment, she stared back at the man who had destroyed her family. Thor, sensing the shift in Emma's emotional state, pressed closer to her side, his warm body providing the anchor she needed to maintain her composure. "Come forward, Emma," Judge Hernandez said gently, her usually stern voice softened by maternal instinct. "Thor is welcome too." The walk to the witness stand felt like a mile, though it was only 30 feet. Each step seemed to echo in the silent courtroom, the soft click of Thor's claws on the polished floor providing a rhythmic counterpoint to Emma's measured pace. When they reached the witness stand, Officer Thompson stepped forward to help Emma up the small step stool that had been placed there for her. Thor immediately positioned himself on the specially installed platform beside the witness chair, his head at the perfect height for Emma to reach out and touch his fur whenever she needed reassurance. The court clerk, a grandmother herself who had worked in the courthouse for 23 years, approached with the Bible and swearing-in materials. But Judge Hernandez raised her hand to stop the traditional oath. "Emma," the judge said, leaning forward slightly from her elevated position, "do you know the difference between telling the truth and telling a lie?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am. Truth is what really happened. Lies are what people say when they want to hide the truth. And do you promise to tell us the truth today about what you saw and heard?" "I promise," Emma said, her voice clear and strong. "Thor and I both promise." Judge Hernandez smiled at the inclusion of the dog in the oath. "Very well. The witness is sworn." Amanda Williams approached the witness stand, her movements careful and deliberate. She had rehearsed this moment hundreds of times, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of seeing Emma sitting there, so small and brave, with Thor's steady presence beside her. "Emma," Amanda began, her voice gentle but clear enough to carry to the back of the packed courtroom. "Can you tell us your full name?" Emma's hand found Thor's fur, her fingers curling into the silky golden strands. "My name is Emma Maria Rodriguez," she said, speaking directly to Thor as she had during all their practice sessions. "The Maria part is for my mommy, who can't be here today because she's in heaven." A collective intake of breath swept through the gallery. Several jurors shifted in their seats, already visibly moved by the simple, heartbreaking honesty of the statement. "And how old are you, Emma?" "I'm 6 years old," Emma replied, still speaking to Thor, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll be 7 next month, but Mommy won't be there for my birthday party this year." Carlos Rodriguez's attorney started to rise, perhaps to object to the emotional nature of the testimony, but a sharp look from Judge Hernandez made him settle back into his chair. "Emma," Amanda continued, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her, "I'd like to ask you about your friend Thor. Can you tell us about him?" For the first time since taking the stand, Emma smiled. "Thor is my best friend," she said, her voice growing stronger. "He's not like other dogs, he's special. He can understand when people are scared or sad, and he knows how to make them feel better. He helped me find my voice again when I thought I'd lost it forever." The courtroom remained transfixed as Emma continued, her confidence building with each word. "Thor taught me that it's okay to be scared, but you have to tell the truth anyway, because the truth is what keeps other people safe." Judge Hernandez glanced at the clock, noting they had been in session for only 10 minutes. But already the emotional weight of Emma's testimony was palpable throughout the room. Amanda took a deep breath, knowing they were about to approach the most difficult part of Emma's testimony, a night that had changed everything. "Emma," she said gently, "are you ready to tell Thor about the last night you spent in your old house with your mommy?" Emma's hand tightened in Thor's fur, her small body tensing as memories threatened to overwhelm her. But then Thor did something that made the entire courtroom gasp. The magnificent dog lifted his head and gently licked Emma's hand, a gesture so perfectly timed and tender that it seemed almost choreographed. Emma looked down at her canine companion, drew in a shaky breath, and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm ready to tell Thor everything." The moment of truth had arrived. The courtroom held its collective breath as Emma Rodriguez looked down at Thor, her small fingers intertwined in his golden fur, like she was drawing strength from every strand. The magnificent retriever gazed back at her with eyes that seemed to hold infinite patience and understanding, as if he knew that the next few minutes would determine not just the outcome of a trial, but the trajectory of a little girl's entire life. "Thor," Emma began, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of the packed courtroom. "Do you remember what I told you about the night everything changed? The night when the scary men came to our house?" The golden retriever's tail moved once, a subtle acknowledgement that seemed to give Emma the courage to continue. In the jury box, 12 adults leaned forward unconsciously, their faces reflecting a mixture of anticipation and dread. "It started like lots of other nights," Emma continued, her voice growing slightly stronger as she settled into the rhythm of speaking to her four-legged confidant. "Daddy was in the living room with his friends, but these weren't nice friends. Like the ones Mommy had. These were the kind of friends who made loud noises and said bad words and made Mommy cry when they came over." Prosecutor Amanda Williams stood perfectly still near the jury box, every instinct screaming at her to guide Emma's testimony, but knowing that any interruption might break the spell of trust between the child and her canine companion. "Mommy was making dinner in the kitchen," Emma continued, unconsciously rocking slightly as she spoke, a self-soothing motion that made several jurors dab at their eyes. "She was humming that song she always hummed, the one about the little bird who found her way home. But then the doorbell rang, and when Daddy opened it, there were 3 new scary men I'd never seen before." Thor shifted slightly on his platform, adjusting his position so that his head rested more comfortably against Emma's leg. The movement was so subtle that most observers missed it, but Emma felt the warmth and pressure immediately, drawing strength from her friend's steady presence. "The new scary men had big black bags," Emma said, her voice taking on the matter-of-fact tone that children use when describing things beyond their comprehension. "They were heavy bags because it took 2 men to carry each one, and they made crinkly noises like the bags at the grocery store, but different, scarier." In the gallery, Maria Santos clutched her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Dr. Rebecca Chun was taking notes, but her professional composure was cracking as she watched her young patient relive the most traumatic night of her life. "Daddy got really excited when he saw the bags," Emma continued, completely absorbed in her conversation with Thor. "He rubbed his hands together like he did when he was happy, but it wasn't the good kind of happy like on Christmas morning. It was the scary kind of happy that made my tummy feel sick." Judge Patricia Hernandez found herself leaning forward despite decades of training to remain impartial. In her 20 years on the bench, she had heard countless testimonies, but none had affected her quite like watching this brave little girl find her voice through her bond with a golden retriever. "Mommy tried to make me go to my room," Emma said, her voice wavering slightly for the first time. "She said I needed to play quietly while Daddy had his business meeting. But I was thirsty, and when I came back to the kitchen to get water, I heard them fighting." Emma's breathing became more rapid, and Thor responded immediately, lifting his head to nuzzle her hand with his warm nose. The gesture was so gentle, so perfectly timed, that it brought tears to the eyes of hardened court officers who had thought they'd seen everything. "It wasn't the regular kind of fighting," Emma whispered to Thor, her voice growing smaller as the memories intensified. "It was worse. One of the scary men was yelling about money, and another one was saying bad words about Daddy. And then Daddy started yelling back, and then—" Emma's voice trailed off, her small body beginning to tremble. The courtroom was so quiet that the only sounds were the gentle hum of the air conditioning and Thor's steady breathing. "It's okay," Emma whispered to Thor, though everyone understood. She was really talking to herself. "I can tell you the scary part because you make me brave." She took a shaky breath and continued. "Then there were loud pops, Thor. Really loud pops like firecrackers on the 4th of July, but scarier. And Mommy screamed not the kind of scream when you see a spider, but the kind of scream that means something really bad is happening. Several jurors were openly crying now, tears streaming down their faces as they listened to a 6-year-old describe witnessing her mother's murder with the innocent clarity that only children possess. I ran to the closet in Mommy's room, like she taught me to do when there was trouble. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger again as she lost herself in the memory. It smelled like her perfume and her pretty dresses, and I thought if I stayed very, very quiet, maybe the scary men would go away and everything would be okay again. Carlos Rodriguez sat at the defendant's table, his face an impassive mask, but his hands were clenched into fists beneath the table. His attorney, Michael Davidson, was furiously taking notes, looking for any inconsistency he could exploit during cross-examination. But it didn't get okay, Thor, Emma said, her voice breaking slightly. It got more scary. I heard Mommy calling my name, but her voice sounded different, like she was hurt and scared. And then I heard one of the scary men say, "Where's the kid?" And another one said, "Find her." And I knew they were looking for me. The courtroom was so silent that people seemed afraid to breathe. Even the court reporter, a woman who had transcribed thousands of testimonies, had tears in her eyes as she captured every word of Emma's heartbreaking account. I pressed myself all the way to the back of the closet, behind Mommy's long coat. Emma continued, her small voice painting a vivid picture of terror that would haunt everyone present for years to come. I could hear them walking around the house, opening doors and moving furniture. Their footsteps were so loud, like monsters stomping around looking for little girls to hurt. Thor remained perfectly still, his warm brown eyes never leaving Emma's face, providing the unwavering support that allowed her to continue with her devastating testimony. Then everything got quiet, Emma whispered. Really, really quiet. No more yelling, no more scary noises, no more footsteps. Just quiet. But it wasn't good quiet like when you're reading a book. It was bad quiet, like when something terrible has happened and no one knows what to say. Amanda Williams felt tears threatening to overwhelm her professional composure. This wasn't just testimony. This was a little girl's soul laid bare, her innocence destroyed by violence she should never have had to witness. I stayed in that closet all night, Thor, Emma said, her voice becoming smaller and more childlike. Even when I had to go potty really bad, even when I got so thirsty, my mouth felt like sand. Even when I was so scared, I couldn't stop shaking. I stayed there because Mommy told me to hide, and I always tried to do what Mommy said. The emotional weight in the courtroom was almost unbearable. Several gallery members were openly sobbing, and even the bailiff, a veteran law enforcement officer who had worked hundreds of trials, was struggling to maintain his composure. When the sun started coming up, I heard new voices, Emma continued, her testimony nearly complete. Nice voices that didn't sound scary. Police voices asking if anyone was there. But I was still too afraid to come out, because what if the scary men were pretending to be police? Emma looked directly at Thor, her dark eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and something that might have been relief. That's when they found me, Thor. That's when I learned that Mommy wasn't going to read me bedtime stories anymore, and that everything was different forever. The silence that followed Emma's testimony was profound and sacred. Judge Hernandez wiped her eyes discreetly, while several jurors made no attempt to hide their tears. In the gallery, there wasn't a dry eye. In the house, Emma leaned down and pressed her face against Thor's soft fur, her small body finally relaxing after carrying the weight of her terrible secret for so long. The golden retriever remained perfectly still, allowing the little girl to draw whatever comfort she needed from his steady presence. "Thank you for listening, Thor," Emma whispered, so quietly that only the court reporter's sensitive microphone picked up her words. Thank you for helping me be brave enough to tell the truth." Amanda Williams approached the witness stand on unsteady legs, knowing that Emma had just delivered the most powerful testimony she had ever heard. The little girl had found her voice, and her words had shattered every heart in the courtroom, including, she hoped, those of the jury who would soon decide Carlos Rodriguez's fate. 3 days after Emma's testimony, the jury returned with a verdict that would echo through legal history. Carlos Rodriguez was found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, child endangerment, drug trafficking, and conspiracy. The sentence, 25 years to life imprisonment. He would never again threaten Emma or any other innocent family. But as prosecutor Amanda Williams stood in the courthouse lobby, surrounded by reporters and cameras, she knew the real victory wasn't measured in years behind bars. The real victory was Emma Rodriguez herself. 6 months had passed since that historic day in courtroom 4C, and the transformation in Emma was nothing short of miraculous. The hollow-eyed, silent child who had once cowered in closets had blossomed into a confident 10-year-old who spoke with the wisdom of someone far beyond her years. The Santos family had officially adopted her on a crisp February morning, with Thor serving as the honorary ring bearer, carrying the adoption papers in a special pouch attached to his vest. "Mia, are you ready for your big day?" Maria Santos called from the kitchen of their Phoenix home, now legally and forever Emma's home. Today marked a milestone that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Emma was scheduled to speak at the Arizona State Capitol to support legislation expanding the use of facility dogs in courtrooms across the state. Emma appeared in the doorway, wearing a blue dress the exact shade of Thor's service vest, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her once hollow eyes now sparkling with purpose and joy. The silver locket containing pictures of her mother and Thor hung around her neck, a tangible reminder of how love could triumph over even the darkest tragedy. "I'm ready, Mama Maria," Emma said, the Spanish endearment rolling naturally off her tongue. She had begun calling Maria Santos Mama Maria 3 months after the adoption, explaining to Dr. Chun that she needed 2 mamas in her heart, the one who was watching from heaven and the one who was taking care of her on earth. Thor padded into the kitchen, his golden coat gleaming in the morning sunlight that streamed through the windows. At 4 years old now, he moved with the confidence of a dog who knew he had changed the world, though his gentle demeanor remained unchanged. His partnership with Emma had become legendary in law enforcement circles, inspiring similar programs in 12 other states. The drive to the Capitol building was filled with excited chatter as Emma practiced her speech with Thor, listening attentively. From the back seat, Officer Jake Thompson, now promoted to Sergeant Thompson in recognition of his groundbreaking work with facility dogs, had volunteered to drive them to the Capitol. His bond with Thor remained strong, but everyone understood that the magnificent retriever's true calling was serving as Emma's lifelong companion and advocate. "Are you nervous about speaking to all those important people?" Roberto Santos asked Emma as they pulled into the Capitol parking lot. Emma considered the question seriously, her hand automatically reaching back to stroke Thor's ears. "A little bit," she admitted. "But Thor taught me that being nervous just means you care about doing something important and helping others scared. Kids find their voices is really, really important." The Arizona State Legislature had never seen anything quite like the scene that unfolded that afternoon. Representatives, senators, and advocacy groups packed the chamber to witness Emma Rodriguez, now known throughout the state as the little girl who changed everything, address the assembly about the importance of facility dogs in the legal system. Emma walked to the podium with Thor by her side, no longer needing his leash, but keeping him close out of preference rather than necessity. The chamber fell silent as she adjusted the microphone to her height and looked out at the sea of adult faces with complete composure. "Hello, my name is Emma Rodriguez, and this is my best friend Thor," she began, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the packed chamber. "A year ago, I couldn't talk to anyone except Thor. Today, I'm talking to all of you because Thor taught me that my voice matters, and that speaking the truth can help keep other kids safe." She paused, her hand finding Thor's head as she had done countless times before. "Some of you might think Thor is just a dog, but you'd be wrong. Thor is a hero. He saved my life, not by fighting bad guys or stopping bullets, but by showing me that I was brave enough to tell my story when it really mattered." The chamber was completely silent, lawmakers and spectators alike transfixed by the poise and wisdom of this remarkable child. "I know there are other kids out there who are scared to talk about bad things that happen to them," Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Maybe they think nobody will believe them, or maybe they're afraid the bad people will hurt them more if they tell. But I want those kids to know that they can be brave too, especially if they have a friend like Thor to help them." State Senator Patricia Valdez, who had sponsored the legislation expanding facility dog programs, wiped tears from her eyes as she listened to Emma's testimony. The bill, dubbed Emma's Law by supporters, would allocate funding for training facility dogs specifically for court proceedings involving child witnesses. "My mom used to tell me that sometimes angels come in unexpected packages," Emma said, her voice carrying a maturity that seemed impossible in someone so young. She was right. My angel came with 4 legs, a golden coat, and the biggest heart in the world. Thor's tail wagged once, slowly, as if acknowledging the compliment. "The bad man who hurt my family is in prison, now where he can't hurt other families," Emma continued. "But that only happened because Thor helped me find the courage to tell the truth. How many other kids could tell their truth if they had a Thor to help them? How many other bad people could be stopped if scared children had a best friend to make them brave?" The impact of Emma's words was immediate and profound. When the vote was taken 2 weeks later, Emma's Law passed unanimously, making Arizona the first state to mandate facility dog programs in all courthouses handling cases involving child witnesses. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Emma herself. She had found not just her voice, but her purpose. Working with Dr. Chun and the Child Advocacy Center, Emma began visiting other traumatized children, always with Thor by her side. Her message was simple but powerful. You are braver than you think, and you don't have to be brave alone. On a warm Saturday morning in May, almost exactly 1 year after her historic testimony, Emma sat in the Santos family's backyard, reading aloud from her favorite book, while Thor dozed contentedly in the shade of a mesquite tree. The book was a new one, written specifically for children who had experienced trauma, and Emma had been asked to provide input during its creation. "Do you think other kids will like this story, Thor?" she asked, scratching behind his ears in the way that never failed to make his tail wag. Thor opened one brown eye and looked at her with the expression that had melted hearts across the nation. Patient, loving, and infinitely wise. "I think they will," Emma answered for him, as she had learned to do during those first precious conversations in the therapy room. Because it's not just about being scared. It's about finding out you're stronger than your fears, especially when you have someone who believes in you. Maria Santos watched from the kitchen window as Emma continued her conversation with Thor, marveling at the resilience of the human spirit and the healing power of unconditional love. The little girl who had once been too frightened to speak was now a voice for countless other children who needed to know that their stories mattered. As the sun set over the Phoenix skyline, painting the desert sky in shades of gold that perfectly matched Thor's magnificent coat, Emma Rodriguez's daughter, survivor, advocate, and hero looked toward the future with hope and determination. She had faced the worst that life could offer and emerged not just intact, but transformed into someone who could light the way for others, still trapped in darkness. Her voice, once silenced by trauma, now rang out clear and strong, carrying a message that would echo through courtrooms and legislative chambers for years to come. Sometimes the most powerful words come from the smallest voices. And sometimes, those voices just need a faithful four-legged friend to help them find their strength. Thor yawned, stretched, and settled more comfortably in the grass. His job as Emma's lifeline complete, but his role as her best friend and advocate destined to last forever. Together, they had proven that justice could indeed wear a golden coat. And that love in all its forms was the most powerful force for healing in the world.